And now, from the University of Virginia Center for Politics.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this Ambassador Series event hosted by the UVA Center for Politics Global Perspectives on Democracy program in partnership with the UVA European Studies program. We are so thankful for you being here and especially thankful for the Madam Ambassador for joining us today. Thank you so much. And yes. And also thankful for, again, I didn't mention her name, but Ambassador Elena Kaisa-Mikkola. And we're also joined today by Professor Alan Stam, who will join her in dialogue here in a little bit. So the ambassador plans to speak for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open to a dialogue between the two for about 20, and then we'll have time for audience Q&A. So be sure to be thinking about any questions that you might want to ask. So the University of Virginia is engaged with Finland in a number of ways, but one of the most prominent is the Darden School of Business's Global Residency Program. Executive MBA students have the opportunity to travel to Finland, to explore the business landscape there, visit companies, and experience the culture. And if you have a moment sometime, be sure to make a point to do an internet search of Darden Global Voices Finland, and you will find a very interesting blog post on one of the students' experiences there. So definitely go back to the video if you didn't note that down, and be sure to check it out because it is fascinating. Okay, so also, you may or may not know, of course you know that Finland joined NATO not too long ago. But you might not know that one of the fundamental relationships between the Commonwealth of Virginia and Finland is a special arrangement with the National Guard. So back in May, Governor Glenn Youngkin announced that the Virginia National Guard was selected as the U.S. partner of Finland for the Department of Defense's National Guard Bureau State Partnership Program. So, and just a couple of weeks ago, Senator Tim Kaine attended Arctic Forge 25 in Finland, a joint exercise between the Karelia Brigade and of the Finnish Army and the Virginia National Guard. And while he was there, he met with the President of Finland, the Foreign Minister, and other government officials. And Senator Kaine came back with only enthusiastic and positive responses to this unique relationship and experience. And I have to say, I love the name Arctic Forge 25. That sounds like a really great 80s movie. So I love that. That's wonderful, and we're so thrilled to have that special, unique relationship between Virginia and Finland. Ambassador Mikkola has a diplomatic career that is surpassed by none, and I know I always say this with our guests who come here, but this is true. And what you're about to hear, you will get an understanding of how her country has faith in her. So, of course, she's been here as ambassador to the United States since this past September. Before that time, she served as the ambassador to China from 2021 from Finland, from 2021 to 2024. And before that, she was the general director of Africa and the Middle East from, 2017 through 2021. And before that, from 2011 through 2016, she was the ambassador to Israel. Now, that is one incredible lineup of countries. And Madam Ambassador, I hope that you can put in for a nice post in a beautiful tropical country next time, because I think you have earned it. I hope you can do that. She's also had diplomatic posts in Belgium, Australia, Greece, and Hungary, and I'm sure many others too. So thank you. Ambassador Mikkola, as I mentioned earlier, will be joined in dialogue today by Professor Alan Stam, who is the University Professor of Public Policy and Politics at the Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy here at UVA. He previously was the director of the International Policy Center at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy and professor of political science and senior research scientist at the University of Michigan. So Professor Stam is joined with us today, as well as his students. So thank you, students of Professor Stam, for joining us. We are greatly appreciative. So Madam Ambassador, many of us have heard, maybe you don't know, that for the past 7 years, Finland has been rated the happiest country in the world. Now, that's pretty amazing. And all I have to say is, I'm not that sure where our country ranks in that scale right now. So I think we would probably all agree that we would love for you to send a little extra of that happiness our way. So we thank you so much for being here, Madam Ambassador, and look forward to hearing all that you have to tell us today. Thank you.
So I was just wondering if it's a problem that I have 2 mics, but I suppose it's not a problem. So anyhow, thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor to be here on these beautiful and historic grounds of the University of Virginia. And this is the first time for me to be here. Like we heard, I've been in the United States now for 6 months, this week, 6 months. And of course, I'd like to thank you, Damon, and the Center for Politics for inviting us here and your kind words. And also a heartfelt thank to Professor Manuela Aquiles and the European Studies program. You introduced me very well, so there is nothing much to add, but maybe I repeat that, as I said, I've been here for 6 months, and this is my 7th posting. Last Sunday, it was a kind of an anniversary. I had been that time 33 years at the Finnish Foreign Service. So basically, I do this, I don't know what else to do anymore. So, but it's been very rewarding and colorful years, and it's been an honor to serve my country also. Here, I arrived during, as we diplomats say, very interesting time, and due to election campaign, and then followed by the new administration, and of course it keeps us busy at the embassy. Our work is to create contacts and dialogue with the administrations, whoever is in power, and that work is ongoing, and it's something very important for us and for every diplomat. So today I'm going to say only a couple of words here because I thought that it's somehow, I prefer to sit there and get your questions and answer to them. But something perhaps about Finland. Finland actually became independent 1917. For many centuries, we were part of Sweden. And then 110 years, we were part of Russia. And since 1917, we have been an independent country, and our independence and sovereignty is something very important. We are a member of the European Union. That's the most important policy frame for us. And of course, now we have been a member of NATO since April 2 years ago. And that is also something that is very important. We value it very much. With the relationship with the United States, of course, got stronger through our NATO membership. It has been always cordial and friendly relations, but it got stronger through that. And also we have a defense cooperation agreement since soon a year with the United States that brings us together, that brings us closer together in the field of security and military. United States is our most important trading partner outside the European Union. The sectors are many. In Finland, we tend to think that we have certain things to offer in this trade relationship and economic relationship. Those are in the field of technology that we, rather a small country, we are pretty good, not me, but we have good engineers and good technical universities. Quantum computing is something that is nowadays important, and there also Finns are doing very well. Maritime industry, Arctic cooperation, icebreakers, energy issues. These are certain things that we would like to bring to this economic and trade relationship and in our relationship in general. I already mentioned this defense cooperation, and maybe one more word about the Arctic. We have understood that the Arctic is more and more important in this world, also in our relationship with United States, also in the field of security, and among NATO allies. I mentioned the word icebreakers. In early November, Finland, United States, and Canada, we signed a so-called Ice Pact. That is a political statement meant to increase cooperation and sharing of expertise in the field of building icebreakers. We are good Finns, have built 60% of the world's icebreakers and designed 80% of the icebreakers in the world. So these are some of the, should I say, in parentheses, hot topics that we have here. When it comes to our security situation, I suppose and European security situation, we might talk about it later. We have always taken our security seriously due to our location in the world map. It's necessary for us. We invest 2.5% of our GDP to defense, and I would assume that number is increasing. And we have since February 2022, we have been steadfast in our support to Ukraine and to their fight against the aggressor. But at the same time, as mentioned, we are, and we always ask, to be honest, we Finns always ask, why is that? We are still the happiest people in the world. So we are not really happy that we would be laughing and joking all the time, but we are quite content with our lives. So work-life balance is good. Our society, yes, every society in the world currently is polarized, more or less, but we are still doing quite okay. We are satisfied with simple things, most of us still. If you are CEO of a big company or electrician or student, what you want to do on Friday evening during summertime, you want to go to your summer cottage and be there alone and enjoy the nature, no matter who you are or what you do or what's your salary. So we have certain values in our society that are common, and I think that's part of us being the happiest country in the world. Let's put it so, just the most content country in the world. I think that would be better. So this was the short introduction, and maybe we can go there. Thank you very much. Okay.
Well, first off, Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for coming. Finland is a long way from Charlottesville, and we do appreciate your efforts. So what I'd like to talk about, if it's all right with you, is sort of two broad issues. One would be international security issues, and then it'd be interesting to sort of dig a little bit deeper into the happiness thing, because as many people are aware, in the United States, we're having some struggles with one another. But starting off with international security, so many people in the United States are tragically not as aware of Finland as they should be. It seems this sort of northern place is very far away. In 1939 and 1940, Finland and the Soviet Union fought a brutal war, referred to either as the Russo-Finnish War or the Winter War, depending on where one is. Stalin had his original goal was to take over all of Finland, and the Finns, like the Ukrainians, fought back heroically. Finland reached a settlement, and in the West, we referred to the adaptation that Finland made with the Soviets as Finlandization, that there was an accommodation that persisted largely through the end of the Cold War. Well, today, from that period until quite recently, Finland was seen by many in the American security communities as trying to pursue something of a middle, more neutral path between Russia and the United States and NATO. There had been conversations back and forth for years, but Finland had understandably insisted upon neutrality. With the invasion of Ukraine, all of that has changed, both for Finland and also for Sweden. And from an American security perspective, the combination of the two is really quite special. Partly because of changes that are taking place that we could talk about in the Arctic, partly changes that are taking place in the Baltic from a naval perspective. But perhaps most acutely, and getting to my question, sorry for the long wind-up, the border with Russia. So from a foreign policy perspective and your extraordinary experiences as a diplomat, could you tell us a little bit about how both the war in Ukraine and also now formal membership in NATO has affected both Finland's diplomatic relationship with Russia, but if any way, how the Finnish people view the Russian people, view Russia as a neighboring state?
Well, during the last 1,000 years, somebody counted that we have had about 30 conflicts with our eastern neighbor. But even with that, we didn't start the war in 1939, and after the Second World War, there was a consensus that we need to have pragmatic, as good as possible relations with our eastern neighbor, because you can't choose your neighbors. Actually, I think here in the United States you are quite lucky, but we are where we are, and we knew that we need to maintain as much possible a good cooperation, as I said, pragmatic relationship. But at the same time, we always knew that we are part of the West. So whenever it was possible to take steps towards integrating our country towards Western institutions and towards the West, we did it. First, by building strong friendship and cooperation with our Nordic neighbors, which is, of course, they are our closest. And then Council of Europe, European Union, and then finally NATO. But our relationship with Russia, of course, changed dramatically February 2022. And at the moment, the relationship is very thin, if I can put it so. We have diplomatic relations, but the number of staff in the embassy is very limited, not only because of us, because of the hosts there also. We share the border, so there must always be certain cooperation at the border. But for example, the political relations on the level of politicians, that hardly exists at the moment. And otherwise, also, it's kind of in a frozen state at the moment. Let's see what happens in the future. It's not going to be like that forever. But for example, the border has been closed soon for 2 years. And that, of course, as such, it's not the most pleasant thing to have. But we have deemed that that was necessary for the time being. But I would like to think that Finnish people still don't see Russians as enemy, but with the government of the country, the relationship, as I said, is very thin.
Now, have the Finland security establishment or the Finnish government changed any of your domestic security policies, increased conscription, defense spending? Have you changed any of your mobilization with your reserves?
No, we are one of the few countries in Europe that has maintained compulsory conscript service throughout the years. So there's been no change in that. We have one of the biggest reserves in Europe. We have had it, and we have it in the future. But of course, it's like everywhere in Europe. I think that the defense spending will get up. We know that there is our friends in the United States are very much hoping that, but it's also in our own interest. So this will happen with some countries sooner, with some countries perhaps a little bit later, but we are heading also there. And just 2-3 years ago, we bought 64 F-35s from United States, and we want to maintain our military as strong as possible.
So one of the significant sort of political disagreements in the United States today is over the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. There's one group of policy advocates that are pushing pretty hard for the United States to largely withdraw from Europe so that the United States can then focus on deterrent capacity in the Indo-Pacific region. There's another group of people that would say, no, the United States should stay fully committed in terms of material support, not obviously boots on the ground, to Ukraine. The outcome of that, whether that turns out badly or not, will depend to significant extent on European countries' ability to come together to provide for their common defense. Does Finland have a particular view or role on, sort of this? You've been the ambassador to China, so I feel a little bit privileged to be able to ask you, because it's this question of how do we balance our concerns in one place versus another. From a Finnish perspective, how do you think this would best go?
Well, President Trump is talking very much of the concept peace through strength. And when it comes to Ukraine, we feel that peace through strength would mean arming Ukraine as much as possible and strengthening the pressure towards Russia as much as possible. And this is how we think in Europe. If Ukraine were to fail, that would be a huge catastrophe, of course, for Ukraine. But we tend to believe that that would also mean that the whole European security structure, whole European security would be under question. And then we are also talking about the allies of United States. We are not quite sure that the sovereignty and independence, that Putin would allow the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine to remain as it is at the moment. And that would also mean that the rules-based international order and all these principles that we have committed to would be endangered.
Are there discussions within Europe to think a little bit further down the road about how the Europeans might come together? So if we look at the geography, Europe is a huge area, and so there's Southern Europe, there's the Atlantic side, and then there's the Northern European states, in particular with both the Baltic and the Arctic. From the Northern states' perspective, is there a view about the future evolution of security concerns with both? So from an American perspective, we look at the Middle East, Iran, radical Islam, Russia in Central Europe, and China as significantly linked. And so one of the challenges I think some of the people in the Trump administration are trying to grapple with is, how do we balance, from an American perspective, sort of in the center of all that, how do we balance our commitments globally? From the Northern European perspective, is there good cooperation between Norway, Sweden, also NATO members, thinking about the Northern European part of that global security?
No, and the cooperation, the Nordic cooperation, and especially, for example, the defense cooperation between Finland and Sweden has been very active during the last years, during the last 10 years, even more perhaps. And now the other Nordics are joining into that. Of course, we are all members of NATO, that is there, but still there is this common will among us, and the Baltics are also quite strong in that. And we kind of tend to believe that in the global scene, different parts of the globe are somehow interlinked. Yeah. So if you show weakness in one part of the world, it might be used against you in the other part of the world.
Now, the places that, as Damon said in the introduction, each of the diplomatic assignments you've had on its own would be extraordinary for someone in the Foreign Service. Having that sequence of being responsible for, from a Finnish perspective, for the Middle East, for China, and now for the United States of America, I can't think of another individual diplomat, perhaps George Kennan.
Well, I'm good company.
Precisely. And this may be a bit out of school to ask you to comment, but could you talk a little bit, so we have students here that many of whom aspire to go into the Foreign Service, comparing from your perspective as an ambassador, the experiences of being in East Asia, in the Middle East, and now North America, representing a wealthy, happy, but relatively small country.
Oh, this is for a book. So, what should I say? You know,
perhaps maybe you could compare and contrast a little bit, because there's such different cultures.
Yes.
And as in your professional role, what kinds of observations would you share with young people that aspire to a Foreign Service role?
Well, it's a great job, and as I told you, I wouldn't know what else to do after doing this for such a long time. But it's everywhere I've been, and especially everywhere I've been as ambassador, Israel, China, and here, it's great to meet people. It's great to learn from people about their countries and cultures and history. So it doesn't taste like paper. There is a human touch in this that is absolutely, that one day when I retire, I will miss that. And I've also, because I come from a small country, I'm also, and now I use the word happy, which we are not every day happy, but I'm happy I've been happy to notice that people are interested in my country. You know, in Israel, people were extremely curious. I like curious people. So they were asking me lots of questions, and in my previous postings also in China. And also here, you coming here, it shows that you are interested, you are curious, you want to know about my country. That feels good. And through this job, no job is great 24/7, but in this job, you can serve your country, get to know nice people, and learn all the time.
So we're going to make a little bit of a transition away from such dark, somewhat depressing sorts of things. But we're going to do that by way of a transition. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about icebreakers. Okay. So many people aren't aware that, in fact, as the ambassador noted, Finland has the preeminent ice-breaking both fleet and technology that they've developed indigenously in Finland on the planet. Now, there's a handful of countries around the Arctic Ocean due to significant extent because of climate change. There's a pretty good understanding that maritime shipment through the Arctic is going to become increasingly important over the next few decades. So the United States is the wealthiest country on Earth. Our icebreaker technology is terrible, old, and poorly maintained. We have one functioning icebreaker that's dilapidated and only can run about half the time. Finland is, as the good ambassador said, is a small country. What lessons or things has Finland learned to be able to not just develop the technology for these ships, but to actually build them, to have the shipyards, to have the employees, to have the young people that are willing to go into this type of work, which is very physically demanding, in many cases somewhat dangerous, but that the Finns take great pride in that. What do you attribute that to? Is it national character? Is it your education system?
Well, it might be a combination of many, but I think it's also that as a small country, you are a big country, rich country. You have everything. You can rely on many things. We have to target the fields that we are good at, or we can be experts and have or be the best in the world. And it's that, but it's also, I think, we are a resilient society. have always known that we have to be prepared for good and bad days and for events in the world that we can't handle. And I think that having a functioning navy, having a functioning maritime system, we are actually an island. In a way, we are an island next to Russia and then towards Scandinavia. So shipbuilding, maritime industry, and there, of course, icebreakers, we absolutely needed them. So, and we needed them in everyday life and everyday in 365 days a year, but also to be prepared if something goes wrong.
And I think this may in part be the advantage of being a far northern state. So in the United States, the general demographic trend is to move further south. But if there's nowhere further south to move to, people do have to be prepared for winter year round. So how are we doing on time? Yeah, sure. Yeah, so think of your questions. I'm going to ask the ambassador one more as a final transition. So your healthcare system is quite extraordinary and incredibly cost effective. How do you guys do it?
I'm not sure it's cost effective, but...
you spend less than half of what we do and people live 8 years longer.
Yeah. Okay, you know the facts better. I've only been here for 6 months. But,
watch what you eat.
So, well, I think we are happy taxpayers. Maybe that's one of the things. We don't mind paying taxes because we trust that we get something in return. It's a question of also trust, that we give you money, you give us services, you treat us citizens good. And that applies not only to health sector, but to other sectors of society like education.
Well, thank you. Let's turn to see if folks in Damon, will you do our questions?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thanks so much to the ambassador and professor for the dialogue. So now it's your turn. So, we have a question right up here, very quickly, up front, Meg or Garland, right up in the third row. If you don't mind speaking into the microphone.
Anyway.
So the people at home can hear you.
Okay. I'm 100% Finn.
Oh, wow.
All my grandparents came from Finland, and my grandmother's name was Kaisa. But my question about the icebreakers, you don't have a port on the Barents Sea, but do you have a fleet of icebreakers that you take around or keep them in another country, or how does that work?
The foreign ministry in Helsinki is next to the sea, and through my window when I was in Helsinki, I could see the icebreakers. So we have them there.
We have two up here. You can. Oh, you have one over there. Okay, great.
Yeah. Hi there. My name is Calvin. I'm a second year at the University of Virginia, so thank you for your time today. I guess my question is, I've seen a pretty concerning trend in international politics of just like shifting away from kind of global solutions, towards more regional ones, seen by the U.S.'s like withdrawal from the WHO, seen by how like global international agreements seem to be less common. Do you think that trend is something that's solidifying in international politics, that in the future there's going to be less of those international solutions and be more of like regional or like bilateral relations as opposed to multilateral? Thank you.
Well, as a Finn coming from a small country, we definitely hope that, as I mentioned, the international rules-based order remains as much as possible as it has been, and that also means that the multilateral institutions we have had stay there. This is beneficial for smaller countries, and we actually like to think it's beneficial for bigger countries, but I cannot talk on behalf of the bigger countries. It reduces the possibility of concept might is right, then all the countries have a say at the common table, be it WHO or whatever organization.
Thank you. Garland, you have a few people over here.
Thank you very much. I wonder, considering what's going on these days, what your perspective is on the possibility of the EU developing a more coherent foreign policy.
Well, the EU actually has in the specific questions where I can say that EU's common foreign and security policy is quite coherent and there might be all the member states behind it. But the problem with EU's common foreign and security policy is that usually for decisions you need to have consensus. So if there's one member state that is against of certain step, then EU cannot come to the forefront united. And that has been the issue for the existence of the CFSP, which is Common Foreign and Security Policy of the EU. There have been discussions during the years that should we rely more on, how you say, qualified majority voting, so that the rules could be changed, that it would not need consensus on every decision, but we are not there, and it's a difficult issue. But even though we are not united in every issue at the moment, yes, there are problems. I would think that for a country like Finland, even what we have now is important. If we can strengthen it, even better.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thanks for being here with us at University of Virginia. I'm Jonathan Crow. I'm a physician in the medical school and interested in health policy, so appreciate the healthcare question. My question for you is, one of the areas I've seen Finland really helping to lead the world is in the silver economy, which I know that's something that Prime Minister Esko-Aho had talked about. This idea that a lot of the developed world has an aging population, that people are reaching retirement age, and we're still wanting to protect them as consumers and also protect their health and well-being as they get older. We've talked about how Finland's such a happy country and I think has a lot to teach the rest of the world. So just wondering how, what some of the internal discussions have been about how to preserve that happiness, especially as populations are getting older, and preserve health and the economy at the same time. Thank you.
Well, what should I say? The population aging is a real problem in Finland. I have to say we do have problems, and that's a real problem. The fertility rate is pretty low there. We need people to come to Finland. We need migrants, and there are not always consensus on that among our decision makers. And when it comes to elderly people and what Esko-Aho promoted during his premiership, then this maybe sounds a bit silly, but and happiness. I think that for Finns, whatever age, the happiness, the building blocks are rather similar. Sorry, a little bit unclear answer, but have to think about it a bit more.
We've had a couple up here, this gentleman and this gentleman, please.
Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. Years ago, I worked at the Foreign Assistance Agency of the United States, USAID, which, to say the least, is in serious jeopardy right now. And my question is, because your country, if my recollection is correct, has been very generous over the years in your foreign assistance, do you feel that you're going to have to change the level of the foreign assistance that you provide around the world if the United States continues the way that it appears we're going?
I don't think that those discussions have taken place yet in Finland among the decision makers. I could imagine that these discussions take place in the international organizations, and there Finland is involved with, of course, for example, other Nordics. It's a big question, and I'm quite convinced that there are many sectors and fields where other countries perhaps should step in. But the discussions are not really that definite yet.
Gentleman in the gray blazer. Yeah, we'll get him. We're alternates. Go ahead, and then we'll come over here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Kasia. It's spelled actually remarkably similar to how your name is spelled, but Kasia, but it's Polish. So I know you were talking about Finland being the happiest country in the world or the most content country in the world. I know you also have a remarkable education system. I wanted to ask briefly how the Finnish education system compares to education system you've seen maybe in China, in the Middle East, and now in the United States.
Well, every country has its own specifics, I suppose, when it comes to education system. So I have perhaps difficulties comparing it country by country. But what we have in Finland is that I think a Finnish parent, you come from southern Finland or Lapland or eastern Finland or western Finland, wherever, when your kids go to school in a city, in a town, in a village, you can always be pretty sure that they get good education. Then it's up to the kid how hard he or she studies. But the level of education is basically okay everywhere in the country. And the other thing which I've noticed during my career in China, also in Israel, and I suppose also here, is that we have pretty strong tradition also of vocational education. And that means that, and now we are here in the university, I myself went to university, but not everybody goes to university. They might choose the vocational path. But then it's important that the vocational education is strong enough to give you tools for your life with your specific job, but also to give you tools for life so that in vocational education you can study some languages, at least Swedish, English, and that you learn perhaps some civics, and so that when you get out of that school, high school, vocational school, you have tools for life. And you can be an active member of the society. So I'm a strong believer of strong vocational education system as well. But I myself don't have any talent, so I went to university.
Well, we won't ask you to build any furniture for us.
No, don't.
But so one of the issues in the United States is, so our country's gone back and forth on letting young people and their families choose which sort of track they would go on versus heavily encouraging all students or the vast majority of students to go to college. In the United States, the pendulum seems to be swinging a little bit back towards the trades, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Is there a government policy, or the students and their families, it's totally up to them which type of track they would head down, and when would they make that kind of decision?
They make that decision at the end of before the end of the ninth grade, and yes, it's always families and the students' choice. But I suppose government is behind there, so that there is certain plan how many places for you have in the field of electronics or whatever fields you have in the vocational school, that they match the job market. Yeah. So that plan is there. At least it used to be there. So.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your comments. Greatly appreciated. There's a very high-profile economist in the United States who's been banging the drum across Europe for Finlandization as the optimal solution to the Ukrainian war. Do you think there's any merit to that? And if you were President Zelensky, would you take it?
Yeah, well, I can't give any advice to President Zelensky. His job is maybe the most difficult one now in the world. But we in Finland, we don't really like very much this Finlandization word. But yes, it is true that after the Second World War, we maintained, as I said, I used the word pragmatic relationship with the Soviet Union. That meant that we were independent. We lost some territory in the world, but our independence was there. But there were certain cracks in our sovereignty. How deep they were, that's a different thing. But we had to take into account in our foreign policy decision making what the Eastern neighbor thinks of this and that. But as I said earlier, we were always ready and able to take steps towards West. And we used every opportunity all the time. And you know, it's kind of easy for us also because we are part of the Nordic family. So we had this home base there where to start from. I think and Ukraine and Finland are different things. Ukraine and Finland are different things historically, culturally. We're not in the same, we are in a different place on the map also. And not that I know exactly what the president of our eastern neighbor is thinking, but I think also that our two countries mean something different for him. So the road we had after the Second World War is not necessarily a road they can take.
I think we have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Cole Walker. I'm a first year here. I just had a quick question kind of regarding a similar thing. I know after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we saw Finland and Sweden both move towards NATO and towards that kind of Western alliance, but other countries in Europe, like Austria, kept their policy of neutrality. So what kind of do you think it was about Finland in specific that made them switch? And then as kind of a brief little follow-up to that, do you think that Finland would be willing to, as the British Prime Minister and French President proposed, to like put troops on the ground as a peacekeeping thing in Ukraine? Or how far do you think Finland would go in their support?
The discussion of Finland joining NATO was there for the last 25 years. And there were constant polling, how you say?
Opinion polling.
Opinion polling.
Yep.
And the level of support for Finland joining NATO was something between 15 and 25%. And it was such also in January, still in January 2022, 25 maybe. But, and we've just discussed this actually earlier today, but 2 days after the invasion of Ukraine, the opinion polls measured again the support, and it was already 75. So it was the most dramatic shift I have seen as a Finn and in my career as a Finnish diplomat. And it's just what it tells about Finns is that not joining NATO was never an ideological choice. It was, once again, a pragmatic choice. We thought that, okay, we were alone during the Second World War. This is how we better run our affairs also in the future. But then when we saw that something unbelievable happened, we were quick to change our minds. And what was the second question? Sorry, I forgot. So you had something else, but you had...
Do you think that Finland would be able...
Oh, yeah. Well, this discussion is not there yet, but one, of course, have to remember that our long border, and we always have to see that we can be alert at our own border, but there is not that discussion yet.
So I saw the young lady in the glasses there with her hand up, but we can go back and forth. But actually, this will probably be our last question, unfortunately. I'm very sorry.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jade Devrans, and switching gears a little bit and more of a general question, but I was just wondering, how does the topic of climate change come up in your role?
In my role? Well, first of all, it's something that we in Finland take, of course, very seriously. You know, that also what we discussed earlier today, that it's these issues, environmental education and issues of climate change, they are there already in the first grade. So I would think that we Finns, we are doing pretty well our share. We are not to teach others how to do. And it was something actually which was quite a lot in my discussions in China, I have to say. In Israel also somewhat, but in China this issue was there. But here, I've been here only for 6 months. I'm looking forward to have my first official discussion on climate change.
I think we have time for one more question if there's one on this side of the room. How about someone way in the back? We haven't had anyone from the very back of the room yet. Someone already. What's that?
He was here for.
Oh, you were, okay. I don't even know where the mics are. Oh.
Hi, I'm Carson Bruce. I'm a fourth year at the University of Virginia, and I was wondering if you could touch on what drew you to foreign service, how have your responsibilities changed over the years, and what advice do you have for students who want to become diplomats?
What drew me? I was always interested in politics, and when I was 3 years old, I said to my parents that I want to become the first female president of Finland. That is not going to happen because we have had a female president, and I wouldn't be interested in that. Anyhow, it's nicer to be a diplomat. I was interested in politics. I was interested in foreign countries. I'm interested in people, and I'm also very grateful to represent my country. That is very important. I was actually, when I started in the Foreign Service, I was also offered a job in Geneva for United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, something that I considered important then, but I wanted to work for Finland. And it's good to want to work for your people. That's my advice. And be interested in people, countries, cultures, and so on.
Well, thank you so much. We so much appreciate it.
And there are some who do have like one quick question. I'm sure we would have a minute.
This gentleman over here had a quick question.
To come on up and ask individually. Sure. Thank you, everybody, on this rainy day. Thank you.